Hello, my friends and fellow VEDSies. So if there are two things you should know about me by now, they are that I love experiencing stories, especially books, and I am very ADHD. Now, this presents a certain challenge because, unfortunately, deciding what I want to read can be really hard. I don't want to force myself to read something that I don't want to because I arbitrarily decided that this is its turn. But analysis paralysis is very real. So I tried a new method over the summer where I essentially created a mini version of my to-be-read list for the season. This seems like it could be the best of both worlds, where I'm curating my list, but there's still plenty of wiggle room. It worked well this summer, and so I made a new list for autumn, a list that I am sharing with you today. The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. Starting with my current read, this was very popular this time last year on the bookish social medias, and I was aware of and curious about this book, but I really only had space for one cozy witchy romance, and so I read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches instead last year. This is about a librarian named Kiela who flees from the kingdom's capital during the revolution, bringing her magical spider plant assistant Kaz and several crates of spell books she is absolutely not authorized to have or use. With nowhere else to go, they return to the island of Cultry and begin living in her late parents' home on the tiny rural island. Kiela and Kaz are trying to figure out how to survive and make a living while remaining undetected, and to make everything more complicated, their neighbor's a Hallmark hunk. I'm currently about a third of the way through, and so far I am most in love with the prose. The island of Cultry is just vivid and lovely and imaginative, and I am having a great time exploring. 10,000 Stitches by Olivia Atwater. In my video recommending books to my fellow VEDSies, I mentioned the first Regency fairy tale book, Half a Soul, as a recommendation to Alicia. This is the second book in the series following a new character as well as a very minor character from the first book. In this book, we follow a maid named Effie who has fallen in love with a gentleman. Impossible scenario, right? It is, unless you make a fairy bargain. So now Effie has 100 days to sew 10,000 stitches into the fairy lord Blackthorn's jacket in order to win her man. What could possibly go wrong? I absolutely loved Lord Blackthorn in the first book, and I am so excited to get to see more of him in this one. Persuasion, Jane Austen. Continuing on the Regency track, I have been meaning to read more Jane Austen, because while I've seen adaptations of Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, and Emma, I've only actually read Sense and Sensibility. Now, you might be asking why then I'm reading Persuasion and not one of the other ones I've seen an adaptation of. That's a fair question. Basically, I love classical literature, historical costuming, and video essays about bad movies, and so for a while I was just inundated with videos about the Dakota Johnson Netflix mess of an adaptation. And in that, I got glimpses of the book they failed to properly adapt. A story full of melancholy, pining, and fear that you're too old for your dreams to come true. In short, a story I'd really like to read. If We Were Villains, M.L. Rio. Like I said, I love classical literature, especially Shakespeare. Therefore, I figured if I was going to try and get into dark academia, the one where a bunch of college students involved in producing a Shakespeare play are involved in a murder felt like a must for me. Plus, I found a version without the dead bird on it. Twelfth Night, Alexine Farrell Fulmuth. Speaking of Shakespeare, Twelfth Night is one of my absolute favorites. So a Twelfth Night adaptation featuring a high school football player and a gamer girl who bond in the online world was something I just couldn't resist. Also, considering these were like default at Target, that's a pretty cool edge. Marian Lane and the Raven's Revenge by T.A. Wilberg. I've briefly discussed the first two Marian Lane books on my channel before, but just in case you missed it, the vibes here are Agent Carter meets Kingsman. The first book was a huge part of getting me back into reading books. and I'm really excited to see how the series wraps up. Even if I'm still skeptical about this whole Bill is straight and has a girlfriend, but it's just not Marion angle. The Black Powder War by Naomi Novik. I read the first 2 Temeraire books back in March, and I've been really meaning to get back into this series. I never thought I'd be into Napoleonic War but with dragons, but I'm very invested. So I need people to bully me into reading this next book. A Steeping of Blood by Hafsa Faisal. This book isn't even out yet, but I don't care. I need to read it. I adored A Tempest of Tea, and having recently reread it, I cannot wait to find out what happens next. I already loved the concept of Victorian-inspired fantasy full of vampires, but with everything we learned over the course of the first book, yeah, this is not a want, this is a need. Something More by Jackie Kalilier. I'm always on the lookout for interesting books by marginalized authors, especially intersectional books and books that don't line up with my experiences. This book follows Jessie, a Palestinian-Canadian girl who gets diagnosed with autism right before the start of high school. But she's determined to not let it get her down and to still have the best first year at Holy Trinity High possible. However, the nuances of high school challenge her black and white thinking, as do the 2 boys she's growing closer to. From what I've heard from the people who've read this is a super sweet book, and I'm going to be hit with equal parts information and nostalgia, which should be a lot of fun. House of Frank by Kay Sinclair. I've heard so many good things about this book. It's about a witch who just lost her sister and is supposed to lay her to rest at this sanctuary. But in order to hold off saying goodbye, she ends up taking a job there. Only problem is the work in question requires magic, something she hasn't been able to do since her sister's death. This book is supposed to be cozy, whimsical, sapphic, and all about grief, which are all things that I love. And then as the cherry on top, what gets quoted in the opening of the book? Night at the Museum 3. Specifically the quote that I want to inspire my first tattoo. I hope I'm not hyping myself up too much for this because I am very excited. Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. While I've read a lot of the Poirot short stories and a few of the Christie novels, I have not gotten to most of the iconic stuff, which is a shame because I've really liked the Christie stuff I read and I've been intending to read more of it. This is me pushing myself to hopefully get back on track. No pun intended. A Song for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. Sci-fi is a genre that I love in visual mediums, but haven't really delved into in literature. I tried a couple times as a kid, but they were always too technical for me. Still, I want to give it another try, and from what I've heard, Becky Chambers is an excellent starting point. This series in particular is supposed to be nice and cozy, and I've been told that it would make for an excellent fall read. And there they are! Will I stick to this list? Well, I probably won't stray too far, but there's no telling what I'll be in the mood for. Also, as you might have noticed, I don't actually own all of these books. My personal rule is that for every 2 books I read, I can purchase a new book. And the Spell Shop is my 33rd. There's a good chance I'll put A Steeping of Blood on my tab, so that I can get the matching Barnes & Noble version, but for the rest, we'll just have to wait and see. That being said, have you read any of these books? Would you like to? Let me know because I am always curious. And with that, my friends and fellow VEDSies, I will see you tomorrow.